Daughter called on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting in my kitchen in Columbus, drinking coffee that had gone cold, reading about property tax appeals because that's the kind of thing I do at 62 when the house gets quiet. Mom. Her voice was different. Tight. She'd had the baby. A boy. Born 2 days ago at Riverside Methodist. She'd been in labor for 14 hours and hadn't called me. I'm coming right now, I said. Don't, she said. We need to talk first. Those 4 words. I drove anyway. My daughter lived in Dublin, the nice part, in a house her husband's family had helped them buy. Brick front, 2-car garage. The kind of neighborhood where everyone's lawn looks like a magazine. I'd driven that route so many times I could do it half asleep. When I got there, my son-in-law answered the door. He was wearing a clean shirt, which struck me as wrong. You fathers don't wear clean shirts. Where's the baby? I asked. He didn't answer, just stepped back and let me in. My daughter was sitting at the kitchen table. No infant in her arms, no exhaustion on her face. She looked like someone who had made a decision and was waiting to deliver it. Where is he? I asked. She looked at the table. We placed him for adoption. I stood there, the refrigerator hummed. Someone's sprinkler was running outside. He was born 2 days ago. I know when he was born, Mom. I pulled out a chair and sat down because my legs stopped working right. Tell me what happened. She told me. The doctors had flagged it in the delivery room. Marcus. That's what I'll call him, my son-in-law, because his name doesn't matter anymore. Marcus had a cousin with the same thing. They'd done the blood work. Confirmed it the next morning. The baby had been diagnosed with a rare metabolic disorder. Manageable, the doctors had said. Requires monitoring, a special diet, regular specialist visits. Not a death sentence. Not even close. He'll need so much, my daughter said. Special formula and the doctors. And when he gets older, the schools won't know what to do with him, and Marcus's job might relocate us, and so you gave him away. We made the best decision for our family. I have heard those words in my memory every day for 7 years. We made the best decision for our family. Like a child is a business transaction. Like a baby with a medical condition is a liability to be managed off the books. I need to know which agency, I said. It's a closed adoption, Mom. Private. We don't have to disclose that. I need to know which agency so I can go get him myself. My son-in-law spoke then for the first time. Margaret, you don't have legal standing. We checked. Maternal grandparents can't override a parental adoption decision. The paperwork is done. They checked. Before they told me, they'd already consulted a lawyer, already signed the papers, already made sure there was nothing I could do. My daughter looked at her hands. My son-in-law looked at the wall. I left. I drove to a Walgreens parking lot 2 miles away and sat there for an hour. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at a shopping cart someone had left in the middle of a space, tipped at an angle, and I thought, he was born 2 days ago. He has been alive for 2 days and already his parents have decided he is too much trouble. Then I cried. I was 62 years old, retired from teaching middle school science for 31 years. My husband had passed 4 years before. I lived alone in the house we'd raised our daughter in. I had a sister in Phoenix who called every Sunday. I had a book club I barely attended. I had a savings account my husband and I had built carefully over 40 years. And somewhere in Columbus, Ohio, my grandson was in a stranger's arms, with a condition that scared his parents enough to throw him away. I went home. I called my sister and talked for 2 hours. Then I called a lawyer. The lawyer confirmed what Marcus had said. Grandparents in Ohio have limited standing and closed adoptions. The agency wouldn't release information. The courts respect parental decisions. I had no legal path. But I had time. I had money. And I had something my daughter and her husband didn't seem to have, the willingness to learn. That night I searched online for his condition. PKU, phenylketonuria. The doctors had mentioned that word to my daughter before she'd decided it was too much. I read everything I could find. It was manageable. Dietary restrictions, low phenylalanine formula as an infant, careful food choices through life, regular blood monitoring. People with PKU became doctors, engineers, teachers, parents themselves. The condition required attention. It did not require abandonment. I searched for parent support groups, found the National PKU Alliance, joined their online forum at midnight, introduced myself, explained that I was a grandmother looking for connection to the PKU community. The responses came the next morning. Parents, adults with PKU, siblings. One woman in Cleveland had a daughter with PKU, now 11, honor roll student, soccer player. She wrote back and said, "Come to our next meetup. We'd love to have you." I went. That was the beginning. The private investigator I hired quit after 7 months. Said the records were sealed tight, the agency professional, no cracks. I thanked him, wrote the check, and hired a different one. I kept going to PKU meetings. Monthly in Columbus, occasionally in Cleveland, once in Cincinnati for a conference. I became the grandmother who always came. People knew my story because I stopped hiding it. My daughter gave up my grandson because he has PKU. I'm trying to find him so that when I do, he knows someone prepared for him. I learned to read nutrition labels the way I used to teach the periodic table. Phenylalanine content, protein equivalents, low-phe substitutes. I stocked my kitchen with metabolic formula even though there was no child to feed. I wanted to be ready. At the Columbus support group, I met a man named Vincent, who ran a nonprofit helping families navigate metabolic disorder diagnoses. He was quiet and precise, a former hospital dietitian. He listened to my whole story one evening over bad coffee in a church basement. After a while, he said, "There's a foster care network that handles children with medical needs. Sometimes placements fall through. Sometimes kids end up moved around more than they should be. I understand. I'll ask some questions. I can't promise anything." "Ask," I said. He did. For a year, nothing came back. Then a little more. My second investigator found a thread, a placement in foster care somewhere in western Pennsylvania, a toddler with PKU, male origin from Franklin County, Ohio. The timeline fit, the location fit, but by the time we got close, the placement had moved again. That's how the first 3 years went. I turned 65, retired from the part-time consulting work I picked up after teaching. My knees started giving me trouble. My sister in Phoenix kept asking me to come visit, take a break. Let it go. I can't let it go, I told her. She stopped asking. The PKU community became my second family. I organized a fundraiser for the Alliance chapter, helped write resource guides for newly diagnosed families, started a small support group specifically for grandparents because I wasn't the only one. There was a grandfather in Dayton whose daughter had also placed a PKU baby, a grandmother in Akron whose son had. We understood each other in a way that required very little explanation. 5 years in, I had a map of Pennsylvania and Ohio on my study wall. Push pins, red for agencies I contacted, blue for foster placements Vincent had tracked, green for PKU clinics where I'd quietly asked after unaccompanied children in the system, 40-something pins. I was 67 pens. I was 67. My hair had been gray for years. I drove more carefully than I used to. But I wasn't stopping. Then on a Thursday afternoon in November, Vincent called. He was careful the way he always was. Measured. "Margaret, I think you should come to Pittsburgh." I was already writing down the address. The group home sat on a residential street in Beachview, a converted double house with a small yard and a ramp at the front entrance. It served children with complex medical needs who had aged out of standard foster placements or been transferred too many times. The director's name was Lorraine. She was a broad-shouldered woman in her 50s who had clearly been dealing with difficult situations for a long time. She led me to a common room. "There's a boy," she said. "He's 7. He's been here since he was 3. PKU, confirmed. Records say Franklin County origin. Came through a private agency in Columbus." My hands went numb. "What's his name?" "We call him Theo." It might not be what his parents named him. "Can I see him? He's in the yard." I haven't told him anything. I don't want to get his hopes up. We walked through to the back door. The yard had a basketball hoop and a picnic table and a sandbox that looked like it hadn't been used in a while. A boy sat on the back steps with a book open on his knees. Small, a little thin, dark hair that needed cutting. He was reading with the concentration of a child who has learned that books don't leave. He looked up when the door opened. His eyes were light brown, the same color as my daughter's. "Go ahead," Lorraine said quietly. I walked over and sat on the step beside him. He watched me the way children do when they're used to being observed, careful, giving away nothing. "Hi," I said. "My name is Margaret." "What are you reading?" He held up the cover. "A Magic Treehouse book. Number 12. Is it good?" He considered this seriously. "It's okay. The facts aren't always right. I almost smiled. What do you mean? He showed me a page. It says knights ate all this food, but people back then didn't really eat like that. I looked it up. Where did you look it up? Lorraine lets me use the computer sometimes. His left hand rested on the book. On the inside of his wrist, slightly faded, was a small oval birthmark. My daughter has the same mark in the same place. She's had it since she was born. I went very still. Theo, I said carefully. Can I ask you something about where you were born? He shrugged. Don't know much about that. That's okay. I just need to talk to Lorraine for a minute. Will you be here when I come back? He turned a page. I'm always here. Inside, I asked Lorraine for his records. She hesitated. I explained about the birthmark. I explained that I'd been searching for 7 years. I explained about the metabolic clinics and the investigator and the pushpins on my wall. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled a thin folder. Franklin County. Private agency. Placed at 6 days old. Metabolic condition noted. 3 foster homes before coming to us. No family contact. No adoption inquiries. The timeline matched. The county matched. The county matched. The condition matched. I need to request a DNA test, I said. I believe he's my grandson. Lorraine set down the folder. You're serious. I've been preparing for 7 years. I'm completely serious. It took 11 days to arrange through attorneys. 11 days during which I drove to Pittsburgh every single morning and sat with Theo. We talked about books. He was particular about facts and uncomfortable with vagueness, which I respected, and told him so directly, which seemed to surprise him. He showed me a notebook where he kept corrections to things he'd read that turned out to be wrong. On the 4th day, he asked me why I kept coming back. I'm looking for someone important to me, I said. Who? Someone I've been trying to find for a long time. He thought about that. Why? Because they mattered to me, even before I met them. He looked at his notebook. Then he said, without looking up, I don't have anyone who does that. The DNA results came on a Friday. My attorney called at 9 in the morning. 99.8%, he said. Biological match. He's your grandson. I sat in my car in the parking garage and could not move for 10 minutes. 7 years. 7 years of driving and calling and map pins and church basement meetings and PKU formulas sitting in my pantry. 7 years of my daughter refusing my calls and my son-in-law's lawyer sending me cease and desist letters when my investigator got too close. 7 years and he was 7 years old and he had been reading Magic Treehouse books and correcting their historical inaccuracies, and he had never had anyone who came back the next day. I wiped my face. Then I called Vincent. I found him, I said. I know, he said. Lorraine called me. His voice was rough. Congratulations, Margaret. The adoption process moved in a way it hadn't moved in 7 years. I had resources, a stable home, no complications in my background. The PKU network sent letters of support. Theo's caseworker in Pittsburgh had been fighting for him to have permanency for 3 years and moved quickly. Lorraine wrote a recommendation that took up 2 full pages. 4 months later, I was standing in a courtroom in Allegheny County in my good blue blazer. Theo stood beside me in a button-down shirt Lorraine had helped him pick out. He hated it and had said so clearly, which I thought showed excellent judgment. The judge asked him, Do you understand what's happening today? Theo looked at me, then at the judge. Margaret's adopting me. I get to leave the group home. How do you feel about that? He was quiet for a moment, like I didn't need to correct anything this time. The judge smiled and signed the papers. Theo talked the entire drive back to Columbus about the Magic Treehouse series and whether we were going to get a dog, and what his room would look like, and whether he could get more notebooks. I answered every question, yes to the notebooks. The dog was under negotiation. At home, he stood in the doorway of his room for a long time. It had a window that looked out at the backyard maple tree. I'd put nothing on the walls because I didn't know what he liked yet. It's yours, I said. We can make it however you want. He walked in slowly, like he was checking for something that might make it wrong. Sat on the bed. Bounced once. Stood up, looked at the window. The maple's going to lose its leaves, he said. It does every year. They come back in April. He nodded, filed that information away. Then he went to the kitchen to tell me that the cereal I'd bought had too much phenylalanine and I needed to get a different kind. That first month was hard in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Theo had learned not to need anyone. He didn't ask for things. He managed himself. He woke every morning at 6, made his own bed with the precision that suggested someone had made it mandatory for a long time, and was sitting at the kitchen table by the time I came downstairs. Ready. Waiting. Not sure what he was waiting for. I consulted with a pediatric dietitian in Columbus before he arrived. We had his formula regimen, his low-fee meals, his monitoring schedule with the metabolic specialist at Nationwide Children's Hospital. He accepted all of it without complaint. He was used to medical routines. What he wasn't used to was someone being consistently there. I learned his tells. When he was overwhelmed, he went very quiet, and the notebook came out. When he was anxious, he organized things. One evening, I came into the kitchen, and all the canned goods had been alphabetized by type. He was standing at the counter, not looking at me. Theo. He didn't answer. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Not tomorrow, not next week. That's permanent now. He organized a can of black beans with mathematical precision. Then he said, very quietly, everyone says that. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. I know. I'm sorry they said it and then didn't mean it. I'm going to mean it. He put the last can in place, turned around. His face was carefully blank. Okay, he said. But I'm keeping the notebooks organized. Fine by me. By month 3, he had opinions about everything. The school I'd enrolled him in wasn't teaching fractions correctly. The metabolic clinic waiting room had chairs that were uncomfortable in a way that was specifically inconsiderate of children. The dog question had become a campaign. He started 3rd grade and his teacher called me after 2 weeks. Not with complaints. She called to say, your grandson is the most precisely curious child I've ever taught. Can we talk about accelerating some of his work? We talked for an hour. He made a friend. A boy named, well, I'll call him Owen, a quiet kid in his class who also liked to fact-check things. They spent recesses looking things up on the school library computers to settle arguments. I started seeing Theo leave for school with his shoulders not quite so tight. One evening, Theo asked me about the search. We were eating dinner, low-fee pasta I'd learned to make from a metabolic recipe book. And he looked up from his plate and said, how did you find me, the real version? So I told him, his grandfather's passing and the empty house. The call from his mother, driving to Dublin and finding no baby, the lawyer who confirmed I had no legal standing. That first night on the PKU forum, the years of meetings and map pins and investigators, the group home in Pittsburgh and the Magic Tree House book and the birthmark on his wrist. He listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When I finished, he looked at his wrist where the birthmark sat. She didn't want me because of the PKU, he said. Yes, he was quiet. Then, people with PKU can live completely normal lives. I know that. I looked it up a long time ago. Theo's voice was controlled, careful. I looked it up and then I stopped looking it up because it made me angry. It made me angry too. He pushed some pasta around his plate. You came anyway. You were my grandson. You were worth coming for. He didn't say anything after that, but that night, before bed, he came to the kitchen doorway where I was washing dishes and signed something. Not sign language. He didn't know sign language. He held up his notebook and he'd written one sentence in his precise block letter handwriting. I'm glad you're factually accurate about not going anywhere. I had to turn back to the dishes so he wouldn't see me cry. The second year, Theo joined an after-school science club. His teacher called again. His project on phenylketonuria metabolism won the regional science fair. He was 10. He stood at his display board and explained his own condition to judges with the composure of someone who had decided that being embarrassed by the truth was a waste of time. I watched from the back of the gymnasium and thought about my daughter and her husband, who had decided he was too much to handle. He was explaining enzyme pathways to a panel of adults who were scribbling notes. I got a call from my daughter that year. Not many. She'd called perhaps 4 times since I found Theo. Always brief, always with the low-grade tension of someone who knows they are in the wrong and resents you for knowing it too. She'd heard I found him. Someone had told her about the science fair. She said, how is he? He's wonderful, I said, and I hung up. The third year brought 2 things. Owen's family moved to another district. Theo took it hard, went quiet for 2 weeks. The notebooks came out constantly. The canned goods were reorganized twice. I sat with him through it. Did not try to tell him it was fine. Just, I'm here. This is hard, and I'm here. He came through it. He found a new group. A robotics club at the community center. A loose collection of kids with intense interests who had found each other. He came home from his first session talking faster than I'd ever heard him talk. The fourth year, I got an email. The address was my son-in-law's. The subject line was, family. I stared at it. Marcus, my son-in-law, wrote that he was reaching out because he knew it was probably unwelcome, but there was something he needed to tell me. He and my daughter had separated. She was living with her parents in Westerville. He was in the Dublin house, which they were selling. During the separation, some things had come out that he thought I deserved to know. He didn't sugarcoat it. His family's business had collapsed. His father had been living on debt and bad investments for years, and when the market shifted, it had all come apart. He and my daughter had been partially financially dependent on his family, and now there was nothing. They were going to be fine eventually, but they weren't fine now. He wrote, I know you have no reason to help us. I know what we did. I'm not asking you to forgive us or to pretend the last 10 years didn't happen. I'm asking, and I know this is a lot, whether Theo would want to know his mother exists. Not whether she deserves it, whether he might want it. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and walked to the backyard and sat on the porch steps and looked at the maple tree, which was in full leaf because it was June. Theo was inside working on his robotics project. I could hear him through the screen door, moving things around, muttering to himself. I thought about what he'd said at the science fair. He told the judges, phenylketonuria doesn't define what a person can do. It's just one piece of information about how someone's body works. Most people have pieces of information about themselves they didn't choose. You work with it. He was 12. He'd said that at 12 years old. I went inside and told him there was an email he needed to know about. He read it, sat with it, turned it over in that precise, methodical way he turned everything over. She wants contact, he asked. The email says, it's up to you. Why does he get to decide? He gave me away too. He did. I know. Theo set down the laptop. He'd grown almost 4 inches in the past year. His voice was starting to change. Does she feel bad about it? I don't know, I said honestly. The email is from your grandfather, not her. He looked at the wall for a long time. Then, if I say I want to meet her, does that mean I'm saying it was okay? No, I said. It just means you're curious, or that you want answers, or that you're stronger than what they did to you. Any of those things can be true without forgiving them. He nodded, filed it away. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. He thought about it for 6 weeks. Then he told me he wanted to meet his mother, once, in a neutral place, with me there. Not to forgive, not to start over. Just to ask one question he'd had for a long time. I emailed my son-in-law, arranged a meeting. A coffee shop in Grandview Heights. Public. Easy to leave. We arrived 15 minutes early. Theo ordered a hot chocolate and did not look nervous, which I suspected was because he was extremely nervous and had decided not to show it. My daughter came in at the arranged time. She'd aged in ways that had nothing to do with years. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy and had gotten used to the weight, but not to the carrying. She was 41. She looked 50. She saw Theo before she saw me. She stopped. He looked at her. He has her eyes. I'd noticed that in Pittsburgh, but it was more obvious now. Same light brown, same slight downward tilt at the outer corners. He didn't stand up, didn't wave. Just watched her walk over and sit down across from him. She said, hi. He said, hi. She looked at her coffee cup. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough. Theo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to ask you something. Of course. Did you know that PKU doesn't mean you can't live a full life? That it's manageable? That the research has been progressing for decades? She looked at her hands. I was scared. He nodded. I know, but you didn't try to find out. You just decided. She didn't answer. I could have grown up in a family, Theo said. His voice was even. Calm. Not angry exactly. Precise. I could have grown up knowing my grandmother and going to school with the same kids for more than 1 year and having a dog. I didn't because you were scared and you didn't try to find out. She started crying. I'm sorry. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, okay, that was it. Not forgiveness, not reunion, just, I said what I needed to say, and I heard what you offered, and now I know. In the car on the way home, he was quiet for a while. Then, can we stop for the dog on the way? I laughed. The shelter isn't on the way home. We can make it on the way. Next weekend, I said. He looked out the window. That was less bad than I expected. What were you expecting? I don't know. He paused. I think I thought I'd feel more. He turned to look at me. I feel more when I come home and you're there than I did seeing her. Is that wrong? No, I said. That's just how family works. It's not always blood. Sometimes it's just the person who keeps coming back. He thought about that. Then I'm naming the dog after a scientist. I expected nothing less. A year after the coffee shop meeting, my son-in-law emailed again. He had remarried quickly, which surprised me, but people make their choices. His new wife had 2 children from a previous marriage. He said they were doing better. He said my daughter was in therapy. He asked if Theo would want to exchange occasional letters. I brought it to Theo. He read the email, considered it the way he considered everything. Letters, he said, not visits, just letters. You'd be in control of what you share and how often. He thought about it for 2 weeks. Then he drafted a letter, handwritten in his block letters, 2 paragraphs, factual, careful. He told her about his science fair project and the robotics club. He did not say he missed her or that it was okay or that he hoped she was well. He signed it. Theo Hargrove Barnes, his last name now. Mine on the front, my late husband's on the back. She wrote back. She is still writing back. She is still writing back. The letters are short and careful on both sides. I don't read them unless he wants me to. Sometimes he does. Sometimes he says, just, she seemed okay in this one. That's enough for now. Maybe it'll be more later. Maybe it won't. That's his to decide. Theo is 13 now. He wants to study biochemistry. He wants to understand the enzyme pathways in PKU metabolism at the molecular level because, as he told his science teacher, you can't fix something if you don't understand exactly how it works. His science teacher told me he says things that make her have to look things up. I take that as a compliment. He got his dog, a 3-year-old beagle named Curie. The name was non-negotiable. He still corrects the Magic Treehouse books when he rereads them. He has an entire notebook dedicated to their historical inaccuracies. He showed it to Owen once, over video call. Owen's family ended up not moving far, and they still talk. And Owen said he should publish it. Theo said he'd need more data first. Some evenings we sit on the back porch and watch the maple tree, and he asks me things. About his grandfather, who he never got to meet. About what I was like as a teacher. About why I kept searching when it would have been easier to stop. I don't always have a good answer to that last one except the true one. Because you were mine, I tell him. From the moment I heard about you. You were mine, and nobody had the right to take that. He nods. Like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. Last September, he stood up at the regional PKU family conference. Adults with PKU, parents, researchers, and talked for 6 minutes without notes about what it's like to be a child with PKU who grew up without a family who understood it. He talked about what it felt like to learn his own condition from the internet in a group home computer lab. He talked about what it meant to finally have someone who'd read all the same things he had. He was 13. He held a room of 200 people completely still. Afterward, a woman came up to me. She had a 5-day-old baby girl with PKU. The diagnosis had come in that morning. She was terrified. She asked me, "Does it get better?" I looked at Theo across the room, talking to a researcher who was taking notes. "It gets better than you can imagine," I said. She started crying. So did I, a little. That's my story. I'm Margaret Hargrove Barnes, and the search was long and hard and worth every single mile of it. If you're watching this and you've had to fight for a child who deserved to be fought for, I hope you know it's worth the fight. Every time. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to Never Too Elderly. We believe the most important chapters don't have an age limit. I thought a lot about what my daughter and her husband actually chose that October. They didn't just choose to give up a baby. They chose not to find out. That's the part that stays with me. A 15-minute conversation with a metabolic specialist would have told him what I eventually learned from an online forum at midnight, that people with PKU become engineers, researchers, teachers, parents, that the condition asks something of you, yes. Attention, consistency, care. But it does not take anything essential away. They made a permanent decision based on a fear they never bothered to examine. And that choice, made in a single, frightened afternoon, cost Theo 7 years. I don't say that to be cruel about them. I say it because I think the hardest thing in life isn't suffering. It's the moment right before suffering, when you have a choice and you're scared and the easier path is right there. My daughter took the easier path and spent the next decade carrying the weight of it. I watched it on her face in that coffee shop. She looked like someone who had been tired for a very long time. I took the harder path, and I won't pretend it wasn't hard. 7 years is a long time to keep driving, keep asking, keep pinning red dots on a map in a study that no one else ever walked into. There were afternoons outside group homes in western Pennsylvania where I sat in my car and couldn't remember why I'd thought this was possible. But here's what I learned about that kind of hard. It builds something in you that nothing else can build. Every time I kept going when I could have stopped, I became a little more certain that Theo was worth finding. And by the time I sat down next to him on those back steps and heard him critique the historical accuracy of a children's book, I had 7 years of certainty behind me. He felt it. I think that's part of why he trusted me. Theo taught me something I hadn't expected to learn at 62. He taught me that intelligence, real intelligence, isn't about being comfortable with what you already know. It's about being willing to find out what you don't. He looked up his own condition in a group home computer lab because not knowing felt worse than knowing. He corrected the Magic Treehouse books, not to be difficult, but because accuracy mattered to him even when he was 7 years old and had no one to care whether it mattered or not. He held on to his own standards when there was nothing around him reinforcing those standards. That's not something you can teach a child directly. It's something that lives or dies depending on whether the world around them treats their mind as worth cultivating. My daughter made her choice from fear. I made mine from something else. I'm not entirely sure what to call it except maybe the refusal to let fear be the last word. I had no guarantee I'd find him. I had no guarantee he'd want to know me when I did. I just knew that a child who had been decided against deserved to have someone decide for him, loudly, with time and money and miles and years if that's what it took. What I know now is this. The people who hurt Theo will carry that, not as punishment from anywhere outside themselves, but simply as the natural weight of knowing what they chose and what it cost a child who did nothing to deserve it. And Theo, who was given nothing at the start except a condition that asked him to pay attention. Theo is going to be fine. More than fine. He named his dog after a scientist. He wants to understand enzyme pathways at the molecular level. He signs his name with 2 last names now, and both of them mean something. That's the whole story. And it's enough.